Here is a tally. Most of us have never once bothered to run. Somewhere in your garage or your back hallway there is a shelf, and every summer you quietly refill it. There is a half-empty aerosol can rattling around on it. A plastic plug-in unit humming in the outlet on your porch, its little reservoir bleeding out repellent one refill at a time. An electric zapper hanging off the deck, buzzing all night mostly at moths. And when the evening gets bad enough, a citronella candle guttering away in its tin, doing a lot less than the smell of it promises. None of these things costs much on any single night. That is exactly how the habit survives. Add up one refill here, one replacement can there, one zapper cartridge every few weeks, across every summer you own a yard or a porch, and you are paying a bill you never actually sat down and agreed to. It is not one big purchase you would notice and question. It is a dozen small ones that never land on the same receipt, so the total stays invisible while the shelf keeps needing to be topped off. There is one object that quietly cancels the whole shelf, and it does not look like the solution to anything. It is a flat green spiral about the size of your palm, coiled tight like a snake asleep in a ring. You light the outer tip, set it down, and it asks nothing else of you. There is no battery to charge and no cartridge to slot in, and nothing to pull a trigger on. It just smolders on its own for about 7 hours, close enough to a full night outdoors that you can light one before dinner and forget it exists until the dishes are done. Let me put the money on the table first, because that is the part that earns the rest of your attention. A box of 30 of these coils runs about $24.99 here in the US, which works out to roughly 80 cents a coil. At about 7 hours a coil, that is under $1 for an entire night's coverage on a porch or a patio. Shop the cheaper imported boxes instead of the name brand, and the same 30 count runs closer to $12, which pushes the per night cost down even further. Either way, you are trading an aerosol can, a plug-in subscription, and a Zapper's electric bill for one spiral and a lighter, and you never have to remember to reorder anything, because a single box carries you through most of a season. One spiral, all night. That is the whole pitch, and the rest of this is why it actually holds up. Here is where it gets more interesting than a frugality trick. What is actually smoldering inside that green spiral is not some inert filler dressed up to look old-fashioned. It is a real poison, drawn out of a real flower, and almost nobody selling you the modern plug-in wants you thinking that hard about either product. That is not a fact meant to scare you off it. It is a fact you deserve to understand before you set one burning near your family, and we are going to earn it properly rather than skim past it. And there is a catch. A genuine one, not a footnote added for balance. This is not a coil you can set down anywhere and expect the same result. There is one step nearly everyone gets wrong the first time they try it, and getting that step wrong is the whole reason some people try the old way once, shrug, and go back to the shelf. We are going to get to exactly what that poison is and exactly what that one step is, in that order, because skipping ahead is how the old way gets written off as a myth. For now, just hold the shape of it. One green spiral, lit and left alone, already doing the job of everything you would otherwise rebuy, for under $1 a night. So where does a thing like this actually come from? Not a factory, and not a marketing team chasing a trend. It starts with a bag of seeds, and it starts with a name most people who use this coil every summer have never heard. In 1885, an American named Eiichiro handed a bag of seeds to a Japanese businessman named Eiichiro Ueyama. The seeds reached Japan in January of 1886, packed away like nothing special, the kind of parcel that could easily have been lost or ignored. They were seeds from a daisy that does not grow wild in Japan at all. It is native to the Balkan coast, a plain white flower called the Dalmatian chrysanthemum, sometimes just called pyrethrum. Ueyama had heard that this particular daisy, dried and crushed, could kill insects, and he wanted to see for himself whether that was true or just a traveler's story. It was true. And Ueyama did something with it almost nobody else had tried. He ground the dried flower heads into powder and pressed that powder into incense, shaped like the sticks burned at a Buddhist altar, because that was the shape people already knew how to burn. Light one end, set it upright, let it smolder. It worked. Mosquitoes near a burning stick backed off. The problem was the shape itself. A stick that size burned out in about 40 minutes. You would have to get up and relight it every time you dozed off, which for a thing meant to protect you while you slept was close to useless. The fix did not come from a chemist or a factory engineer, it came from Ueyama's wife, Yuki. In 1895, watching the same short-lived sticks burn down again and again, she suggested something simple. Stop making it straight. Coil it into a spiral instead, wound tight like a ring, so the same amount of material could pack into a shape that burns along a much longer path before it runs out. It sounds almost too small an idea to matter. It changed everything. A spiral of that incense did not last 40 minutes. It lasted about 6 hours, and with later refinement close to 7, long enough to cover a full night's sleep instead of one restless nap. That jump is the whole reason a coil can be lit before dinner and forgotten until morning. All of it came from the new shape, using the very same flour powder as the stick before it. From there, the business did what a lot of Japanese industries of that era did. It stopped depending on someone else's raw material and started supplying the world. For years, that Dalmatian daisy had to be imported, grown an ocean away on the Adriatic coast, shipped in as seed and dried flour. Japanese growers changed that. Full-scale export of pyrethrum powder out of Japan began in 1905, and it did not stop there. By the 1930s, Japan had become the single biggest exporter of pyrethrum powder anywhere in the world, turning a borrowed flour into a national crop and a national export. Two smaller details round out the object, and both are still sitting on the box today if you know where to look. The red rooster printed on the packaging is not decoration picked at random. It traces back to a Chinese proverb roughly 2,000 years old, recorded in the Shiji, that says it is better to be the head of a rooster than the tail of a bull, better to lead something small than trail behind something large, and the brand name stamped next to that rooster, Kincho, translates to something like golden bird. That trademark was registered in 1910, and it has sat on the same packaging, largely unchanged, ever since. So this coil carries a genuinely specific paper trail behind it. An American's bag of seeds, a businessman willing to test a rumor, a wife's small correction to a shape, a country that turned an imported flour into an export empire. None of that yet explains why the smoke actually keeps a mosquito away from your ankle. That part is chemistry, not history, and it is next. So here's the chemistry the last few minutes owed you. Inside the crushed petals of that daisy sits a family of compounds called pyrethrins. They are nearly odorless to a person standing nearby and violently effective against an insect's nervous system. Light the coil, and the heat lifts a portion of those pyrethrins off the burning tip and carries them out into the air as smoke. A mosquito drifting through that smoke does not need to land on you or touch the coil itself. Breathing a low concentration of the compound is enough to scramble the signals running along its nervous system. The legs misfire, the wings stutter, and the insect peels away long before it reaches your skin. Push the concentration higher, closer to the glowing tip, or inside a tighter space, and that same compound stops being a repellent and starts being a kill. That whole range, from mild irritant to lethal dose, lives inside one thin trail of smoke. There is no electronics behind it and no chemical plant, just heat pulling a flower's own defense chemical out into the air where it can do a second job it never evolved for. That is not a folk claim resting on a company's word either. Researchers running a field trial in northern Tanzania set pyrethroid coils burning inside huts where wild, biting mosquito populations were already active, not a lab colony bred for the test. They measured how much less those mosquitoes fed on the people sleeping inside, and they tracked something just as telling. A share of the mosquitoes that started the night in the hut had left it by morning, pushed out by the smoke rather than staying to feed. That is the honest shape of the evidence. A burning coil will not clear a room of every mosquito hunting for blood, and no serious study claims it does. It measurably cuts how many bites land, and it pushes part of the swarm out of the space. For an object this cheap, that is a real result, not a marketing line. Light it once, and that is the whole arrangement. One spiral, all night, the chemistry doing quiet work while a plug-in unit is still warming up in the outlet behind it. Here is where most people who own one get far less out of it than the coil is capable of giving them, and it has nothing to do with the brand stamped on the box or the price paid for it. It comes down to where the smoke actually goes. A coil works by filling a space with a low, steady concentration of that compound, thick enough for a mosquito to notice, light enough for a person nearby to barely register. That only happens where the smoke has somewhere to gather. A screened porch, the sheltered corner of a patio, the mesh doorway of a tent, the narrow entry of a house where shoes come off before the door. Set that same coil out in the middle of an open lawn on a breezy evening, and the smoke that would have pooled around a porch chair scatters into the yard within seconds, diluted past the point of touching the mosquito circling your feet. The failure is not in the coil. It was simply asked to hold a cloud of smoke in open, moving air, which it was never built to do. Two backyards, the same coil, the same evening. One has it burning under an awning by a folding chair, the other has it staked out in open grass near the laundry line, and only one of those 2 yards ever feels the difference. The households who swear by this thing are, almost without exception, the ones who stumbled onto that by accident. They set the coil close to where they actually sit, near enough that the smoke has to drift past them on its way anywhere else, and upwind, so the breeze carries that trail toward their chair instead of away from it. Move the same lit coil 10 feet downwind or out onto open ground, and the 80 cents spent on it buys you almost nothing. The chemistry is exactly the same in both yards. The only thing that differs is where the smoke can gather, and that placement is the part almost nobody explains when you buy the box. There is more of this ahead than one coil, more forgotten methods like it go up here on a regular basis, and subscribing is the simplest way to make sure the next one finds you instead of you having to go looking for it. None of this makes the coil perfect, and pretending otherwise would undo everything Honest said so far. Burning anything produces smoke, and that smoke is the real catch this method carries, the one true cost sitting underneath the low price. What that catch actually is, and why an entire industry built around not having it would rather you never ask the question, deserves its own honest reckoning. That reckoning comes next. So let me say it plainly instead of leaving it as a shadow. What comes off that glowing tip, along with the pyrethrins, is smoke. And smoke from any burning coil carries the same kind of fine particle pollution as wood smoke, plus carbon monoxide and a handful of other combustion byproducts riding along for the trip. That is not a reason to panic over a porch chair. It is a reason to treat the coil like any small fire and let it breathe. Give it real airflow. Never hold it under your chin in a closed bedroom overnight. And take extra care if someone in the house has asthma or there is an infant sleeping nearby. The risk was never in the flower itself, it is in the smoke, and a little ventilation handles it completely. Honesty about the limits matters just as much. This coil is a repellent and a knockdown aid for one enclosed pocket of air. It is not a vaccine, and it is not a force field over your whole yard. It will not make every mosquito for a mile disappear, and anyone selling you that promise is selling you a story. Placed right, what you get is a real measured drop in how many bites land while you sit there. That is the honest ceiling, and it still beats most of what you would otherwise keep buying. Which brings us to the part of this story nobody selling you a plug-in wants told. That shelf you started this video staring at, the aerosol can, the plug-in humming in the outlet, the bottle of refill liquid you buy again every month or so, did not appear because the coil ever stopped working. What happened is that the coil's one honest weakness, the smoke, became somebody's favorite argument against it. Clean, odorless, modern. 3 words built to make you forget a spiral was already doing the job for a fraction of the price, and every refill bottle after that is a small, recurring payment for not having to smell the thing that worked the whole time. Nobody is hiding a study, it is just a business built on a cheaper method's one real trade-off. Sold back to you as an upgrade. And here is the honest twist underneath all of it. The poison came from a daisy that never grew in Japan, carried there in a bag of seeds from an American plant collector. The country did not invent the chemistry. What it invented, what one household actually gave the world, was the shape. A stick turned into a spiral, so a short burn became a night's worth of quiet, and that spiral has been refined and kept in use for well over a century since. So carry it forward the way it was carried to you. Someone in your family already fought this same mosquito problem long before a single plug-in existed, with whatever their era or their country handed them. Now you know one option that quietly worked the whole time, cheap, honest about its limits, and about as low-tech as a lit spiral gets. One spiral, all night. It is just what happens when you let the smoke go where it is supposed to go. Tell me in the comments what you still burn, spray, or plug in every summer, and who in your family kept the mosquitoes off before any of it existed. Somebody taught you something once without a receipt attached. Pass this one along the same way.